all of you watching right now, when you got out of college, you decided where you want to go to work. Gavin, Jonquel, Mustafa, likely were like, hey, let me look at offers. What part of the country I want to work in? Do I want to work in a small place, a mid-sized place, a corporate place? Do I want to work in a major company? Do I want to sit here? Hey, do I want to work in a warm climate? Do I want to work in a cold climate? Do I want to work what part of the country? All those different decisions were made. But if you're an athlete, wherever they tell you you get drafted, that's where you go. Baseball, basketball, football, the top revenue sports. Now, tennis, you can turn pro early. Golf, you can turn pro early. But the team sports, nah, you gonna go where we tell you to go. It's called the draft. Just like the military draft. Well, Deion Sanders was on a podcast, Gillian Wallow, and the subject came up regarding his son, Shedeur Sanders, quarterback for the Colorado Buffaloes, Travis Hunter, defensive back and wide receiver for the Buffaloes. And this is what they said.
Where do you predict Shedeur and Travis going in the draft?
Top 4.
Ooh, that's pretty beautiful.
Anywhere from 1 through 4. One of them is going to be 1.
That's what I'm talking about.
One of them is going to be
Speak it
1.
into existence.
And the latter one would not go behind 4. Now, all this is subjective because I know where I want them to go. And let's not forget Shallow, okay? But I know where I want them to go. So there's certain cities that ain't gonna happen.
Okay, you on point.
It's gonna be it's gonna be an Eli.
Now, what he's referencing was when Eli Manning came out of college, his daddy was like, yeah, the San Diego Chargers have the number 1 pick. We ain't going to San Diego. We ain't going there. So, Chargers didn't pick him. Well, that was because he made it clear it was a trade. When John Elway came out, the Colts had the draft pick. He's like, yeah, I ain't going to Baltimore. No, that ain't happening. I ain't going to Baltimore. So there's a trade with the Denver Broncos. When Bo Jackson came out, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they were awful. They had the number 1 draft pick. He said, Tampa Bay, y'all draft me, I'm going to play baseball. Tampa Bay drafted Bo Jackson. Bo wouldn't play baseball. So what Deion is saying I know organizations, I know systems. This is where I want my son and where I want Travis Hunter to go. Now, a lot of folk have taken offense to this because he dared say that. He dared say it. Well, I think he's right. I remember watching an NFL draft. Was it Zach LaVine? I think it was Zach LaVine. Man, when they had a pick, Zach LaVine, if I find it, y'all look up, I think Zach LaVine was supposed to get drafted. I think the Timberwolves drafted him. My man was pissed when he got drafted. I think it was Zach LaVine. And the video was, he was, awful team and it's cold as hell. And my man was like, hey, I ain't trying to sit here and go to that particular place. Those things, they've happened. I think it was Zach LaVine. It was some player. We've seen it before. But they basically force you to go where they tell you to go. And then in the NFL, they signed the rookies to a 5-year contract. 5-year deal. So unless you trade it, you'd have 5 years. There's not a single person watching that will want to be at a job 5 years and you hate it. You don't like the city. You don't like the company. You don't like your employees. The facilities suck. You ain't staying there 5 years. That's what happens in sports. So, Mustafa, I'm with Deion 100%. Hell no. We gonna tell certain teams, don't pick my son because he is not coming to your city. I'm with Deion.
Yeah. I mean, I totally get where Deion's coming from. You know, the beauty of having a parent like Deion is that he's an informed advocate. That means that he understands the system. He knows the various cities. He also understands that when you're becoming a professional athlete, that you have maybe 3 or 4 years for the average career for most athletes. So you got to make sure that you're making the right decisions for you. And that often means that, you know, just because somebody says you're going to be in a certain city, that might not be the right one for you, might not be the right program based upon your skill set. And it can also play a big role in how long you actually are in the league, whether it's in the NBA or, you know, it's in the NFL or whatever the situation might be. So I'm glad when people have these informed advocates who will stand up for them and help them to make the right decisions, because they have lifelong consequences, either positive or negative, that come out of it.
I mean, here's an example. Jonquil. When Vince Young came out of the University of Texas, led them to the national championship, Jeff Fisher did not want him at all. Bud Adams, the owner, did. Now, here you got the Titans used to be the Houston Oilers. So Bud wanted him bad. Bud owned the team. Owner made the decision. Fisher hated Vince Young, gave him hell, was constantly dogging him. Vince Young's married to my cousin. And Vince Young has talked about how he had to deal with that. The reality is his career was stunted because he had a head coach who hated him, who didn't want to draft him at all. Now imagine if Vince Young goes to a place where the coach wants him. Totally different environment. Happens all the time. There are coaches who don't want certain players, but management drafts them. Now they got to deal with the coach. Now you got attitude. Happens all the time. I believe that Deion is absolutely right. He wants his son and Travis Hunter, who he looks at as a son, to be in the best position to be great. And what he's saying is some teams we're not going to play for. And I think more athletes should do this because they should not be forced to go to places just because of a draft.
Well, look at what we all have just seen play out in the media with Russell Wilson, right? The coach with the coach there in Colorado couldn't stand him, right? Wanted him, spoke out publicly against him, saying he was too focused on his family. Why is that? Why is that something that someone would speak ill of or publicly against him? They wanted him to return portions of his contract, millions and millions of dollars, and really just made it miserable for him. And we're used to seeing Russell Wilson being a star, you know, so certainly whatever environments, the environments that you're placed as directly correlates to your success there. Secondarily, as it relates to Deion Sanders, I mean, Deion Sanders is a legend, right? There's only one Deion Sanders. There's only going to be one Deion Sanders. So not only does he have the knowledge, the skill, the connections, but also, lastly, ever since these NIL deals have come along, college and high school athletes have more leverage now, right? A lot of them are millionaires. And so I do think that does put them in a different position than maybe 6 or 7 years ago, right?
Well, first of all, a lot of not millionaires. But to your point, it used to be, man, they broke, they got no choice.
Correct.
Now it's a different conversation because, I now don't have to take a deal for financial reasons. And you're absolutely right. That's what's changed the game.
Correct.
Gavin.
Yeah, more of this. And I want to expand this out even further, right? Like this is an example of black athletes harnessing the leverage that they have, right? Because we know there'd be no NFL, there'd be no NCAA without black athletes. It also reminds me of the news we heard recently where Derek Johnson, the head of the NAACP, is now telling athletes at the college level, I guess high school seniors who are looking to play in college, to stay out of Florida. Now, look, I don't know how effective right now that approach is going to be when most athletes decide where to play based on where the best opportunity is going to be. I don't blame them for doing that, for considering, where they're going to get the most playing time, where they're going to get the most investment of resources. We just got to decide how serious we want to be about using our leverage, right? And John Quell is right. Athletes have a lot more leverage now with NIL. What we also got to make sure we do is we got to make sure, going back to our earlier conversation, that our HBCUs are well funded. Roland, you keep beating the drum on this, which is that the Biden-Harris administration has called out the underinvestment, the underfunding in HBCUs. Where we are right now is that Black athletes should not have to choose between going to a school that, or, at the college level or at the NFL, right? Going to a team, I'm going to talk about college, going to a university that's not, going to support them as athletes, as students, that might be in a state where we're seeing a bunch of really regressive laws being passed, but where they might get really good investments, or going to an HBCU where they're going to get the nurturing, they're going to get the support, right? But that doesn't have the resources. So we got to close that gap, right? And I'm really glad, Roland, that you brought this up as a topic for tonight. A little known fact about myself is that I spent my first 2 years out of college working for the NFL. I learned a lot, saw the good, the bad, and the ugly, as you can imagine, of the sports industry, especially the NFL. But the one clear takeaway that I had was that as a community, again, I'm expanding this out, we got to have a seat at the ownership table, right? In the professional leagues, there are 0 Black owners, controlling owners, I should clarify, in the NFL. There are 0 controlling owners in the NBA after Michael Jordan, sold his share in the Hornets not too long ago. There's 0 controlling owners in, the MLB. Sheila Johnson, Black woman, right? She is the governing owner right now of the Washington Mystics. We need more of that, right? When you look at the sports industry writ large, we need to have more Black owners, well, a Black owner in the NFL's context, and a critical mass of Black owners who have seats at that table. And what does that mean? It's going to take more people like the guest we just had, who started her business and is growing her business. It's going to take more people like you, Roland. When you own the Houston Texans one day, just remember me, give me 1 ticket, please. But it's going to take more of that. And so I commend Coach Prime for his comments. I commend this mentality, this shift, and recognizing and understanding the leverage that Black athletes have. There'd be no NFL, NCAA without us, without them. And so I really look forward to seeing, as a community, athletes across the board looking to harness their collective power and leverage.
Let me show you this here real quick here. You talk about doing something. I hope the NCAA does something about this here. Utah head coach Lynn Roberts was at a news conference where she talked about racism that her team faced when they had an NCAA game in Idaho. Watch this.
We had several instances of some kind of racial hate crimes towards our program, and incredibly upsetting for all of us. And, you think in our worlds, in athletics and in university settings, it's shocking, in a there's so much diversity on a college campus, and so you're just not exposed to that very often. And so when you are, it's like, and you have people say, man, I can't believe that happened. But, racism is real, and it happens, and it's awful. And so for our players, whether they are, white, black, green, whatever, no one knew how to handle it, and it was really upsetting. And for our players and staff to not feel safe in an NCAA tournament environment, it's messed up. And so we moved hotels, and the NCAA and Gonzaga worked to get us in a new hotel, and we appreciate that. But yeah, that's what happened, and it was a distraction and upsetting and unfortunate. This should be a positive for everybody involved. This should be a joyous time for our program, and to have kind of a black eye on that experience is unfortunate. We had.
NCAA, don't play any more games in Idaho. Mustafa?
Yeah, I remember when I was a college athlete, and the first time that I ever had to deal with racism as an athlete was actually in Tennessee. When we started the show, I was actually thinking about that. The NAACP, the NCAA, maybe them also have to do a better job. They have to understand these dynamics that are going on continually. From the beginning when we first integrated into sports to today, that there are still both the mental and the physical and the spiritual impacts that happen because of our exposure to racism. So for younger people, especially who have not yet been able to develop the skills to be able to deal with those types of things, it can have long-term impacts. So I'm hoping that we continue to put pressure, that we make sure that they continue to evolve, and that we hold them accountable. Because when you're an athlete, and if you do something that's not to the letter of the law that they've put out, then there are ramifications. But unfortunately, those associations who are often over top of athletes don't often have to follow the same sets of rules and don't have to continue to evolve and grow.
Jonquil.
I too was a college athlete. I played college basketball, but however, I went to a historically Black college. So all the schools I played against, everybody was Black. So I didn't have to deal with it in that context. But number one, I'm glad that she did address that in a press conference so that it is getting national coverage as it relates to how athletes are still being treated. And frankly, just historically, just what athletes have had to endure. My father is a NCAA college basketball Hall of Famer. And, even growing up during the era of what he did and what he had to go through as an athlete, he went all the way to New Mexico State to play basketball and avoided Duke and some of the other schools because of how historically how athletes were treated. And it's still something that is still going on today, and it's something that we cannot ignore.
Kevin?
Absolutely. I want to reiterate what both Mustafa and Jonquil said. And it's important to remember the history here, right? You take players like Fritz Pollard, who was one of the earliest Black athletes in the NFL and also who was the first Black coach in the NFL. Nowadays, we have the Fritz Pollard Alliance, an organization that's dedicated to increasing the diversity of Black coaches and other front office staff right across professional sports, or at least the NFL. And, when he was in the league back in the day, he and so many others couldn't stay at the same hotels as, the white players, couldn't dress with the team in the locker room, couldn't eat, with the rest of the team in restaurants. And so when we see these things, these instances like the coach just described playing out today, I just think it's important to remember the history here and remember that obviously what we're seeing now is nothing new, but it helps us keep in context, right? The importance of, remembering this history and it should instruct us and guide us now toward the future that we need to create in sports. And again, to what I said before, I do think that for us to truly see that change, it's going to take obviously more, Black folks in position of leadership across sports, but also, like I was saying before, at the ownership table who can truly, use the power, of the purse and truly, make the lasting change that's necessary, in sports and in society broader than that. And there are obviously unique barriers within, the sports industry that keep that from happening, but there are a whole host of barriers that exist, outside of the sports industry, which is why, we have yet to see, more Black folks have the capital to be able to, afford these increasingly expensive teams. And so, it's going to take a full court press, to use the sports analogy there. But I appreciate the coach calling out that. And it's important for us to keep the history in mind as we try to steer toward a better future for sports.
Fanbase is pioneering a new era of social media and investment. This next generation social app has already raised $10 million and has just opened a new round to invest. For details on how to invest, visit startengine.com/fanbase or scan the QR code. Another way we're giving you the freedom to be you without limits.